Welcome to Dark Loops and the What If Crew, a podcast in which we discuss the new Marvel series, What If? I'm your host, Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher from Illinois State University. And today we discuss episode 1, What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? Fellow members of the What If Crew, you'll have noticed that in the intro, each of you is assigned an alias. Please tell the audience hello and say a little something about that alias. And we'll start with Stanford.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stanford Carpenter. My alias was Nightcrawler. I picked Nightcrawler as my alias because he's part of some of my one of my earliest childhood memories, which was, the X-Men was one of my first favorite comics. And I remember an opening scene where you've got all the X-Men gathered around, and there's this one guy that looks kind of like Errol Flynn, and then the Sentinels show up, and all of a sudden he pushes a button, his image inducer goes down, and he's Nightcrawler, right? And then as I read successive issues, I fell in love with the character. I fell in love with the character because of what, if you look at the original X-Men, and even if you look at the first round of the new X-Men, one of the things that I always thought was kind of problematic about the idea of mutants was that so many of the mutants and so many of the X-Men could pass for human. And for me, I really that struggle with being somebody who sticks out, with somebody who doesn't fit in visually, was very much embodied in Nightcrawler. And so there was an element to him that matched my own experiences that didn't happen for the rest of the X-Men. And then to add on to it, I also was very enamored with the fact that he became sort of the he became very much the moral voice of the X-Men. And I thought that was something that I found very interesting, because in the other comics I was reading, I didn't really feel like there was a character that tried that hard to take up that space.
Excellent. Thank you very much. How about you, Daniel?
Wow, I love that answer that Stanford just gave. So my alias is Spider-Man, but in this case, it's not Peter Parker, but rather more like an amalgam figure. And I'm thinking mainly of the Spider-Verse comics, and the movie was great too. But in the comics, we really get to see how the Spider-Verse or the multiverse is infinite. There are an infinite number of universes and alternate realities. And there's every imaginable version of Spider-Man. Aunt May is Spider-Man, or like Uncle Ben is Spider-Man. I mean, at some point, everyone is Spider-Man in different ways. And so as I was reading that storyline, and the reason I love it so much was, it was fun to sort of imagine a universe where I was Spider-Man or someone like me. And this would be a universe where he didn't even necessarily go around in a costume, slinging webs and punching bad guys. It would just be a regular life. But in some way, shape, or form, he was Spider-Man, just going about trying to do good deeds, according to where he was at with the resources that he had, or she had, or they had. So I love the Spider-Verse storylines. Are my favorite all-time events in all time of comics. And so my alter ego, or rather alias, is the Spider archetype.
No, I love
Spider-Man in the multiverse, not so much Peter Parker. Well, obviously I like Peter Parker too, but yeah.
No, I get it. Absolutely fantastic. How about you, Eric?
So I'm Dr. Eric Wesselmann. I'm a social psychologist and professor at Illinois State University. And so much like Stanford, the X-Men was one of my favorite comics growing up, one of the first titles that I read with any regularity. And so my alias as Professor Charles Xavier, professor. So I'm a teacher, and so I resonate with that. I like that Xavier, fights for a dream of a world that values diversity and inclusion. He's an idealist, yet he's also flawed, right? And so a lot for me to connect with there. My favorite memory is actually when I was at a con a few years ago, and there was this cosplayer there who had created like this hover chair based off of the mid-90s animated series. So it actually worked. It looked like it was floating on plastic clouds. It played the theme song. And so that was just really cool. So I got my picture with him, and I very much was impressed with the artistry.
No, that's fantastic. So my alias is Jessica Jones. We've talked about this before. But what I truly love about the Jessica Jones arc, the alias written by Bendis and illustrated by Gatos, with David Mack doing the covers. First of all, just the artwork, unbelievable. And the writing for me was a fantastic story about someone who had the traditional superhero origin story, some freak accident, gained superpowers, and then has to really decide if she wants them, does the whole thing of dressing up like Barbie, trying to be one of those type of female superheroes, and just says, no, this is not for me. Of course, things got dramatic. She did actually attack someone because the Purple Man took over her mind and made her attack the Avengers. And so they didn't like her for a while. But I just love her struggle. And then in Alias, she has all these wonderful small stories where she's hired as a private detective. That's what she becomes. And she finds a runaway and brings the runaway home, and just has these very complex but simple lived life hero adventures that don't usually get called hero adventures. So very soft space in my heart for the character of Jessica Jones. So and then of course meeting David Mack was pretty awesome. So here's how we do this podcast. Everybody's been asked to come up with their favorite line or their favorite scene or their favorite character. They're going to talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll all discuss the point they made, and then we'll go on to the next person and take it from there. So we're going to start with Eric.
So one of my favorite moments in this first episode was when Peggy and Steve are in the bar, and they're having their sort of it's an intimate moment of sharing their feelings, and they tell each other that they are both each other's heroes. And so to me, that was just sort of a really wonderful example of equality in their relationship. I mean, they both support each other, they both find admiration in each other, and they complement each other's skill sets. And so I really enjoyed that moment.
Yeah, I love the scene where she's flying his back, attacking Nazi planes and doing all kinds of damage to Nazi pilots, and then does this wonderful flip in the air and lands on the Iron Giant. And there was a total complementary relationship, which I thought was a fantastic thing to illustrate. And you other guys want to react to that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead, Sam.
I actually thought that their relationship was much more interesting in this half hour than it was in the entire 2 hours of the Captain America movie.
I think the writer will be glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was little things. We were able to pull away from the normal gender dynamics by virtue of the fact that she was the one with power. She, and not just having power, but she was physically bigger than him, right? She wasn't, and because there's a whole bunch of things that we assume. We always assume that men are going to be taller than their partners. That women want that hunky, that man who's hunky and all that stuff. And Steve Rogers isn't that. And the fact that they still had space and created space for that relationship is really interesting to me, because it also makes Steve Rogers a much more interesting character. It's easy for us to accept Steve Rogers, having the woman that he wants when he's juiced up on the super soldier serum, right?
Right.
And I have to be honest, I'm also, I watched it the second time with my daughter, and she said something really interesting. She said flat out, she said, I like this relationship. I can see this relationship. And I never really cared for their other relationship. And I thought that was interesting, that that my daughter and I were both feeling the exact same thing. And, you know, she's 15. And she was just like, she's like, oh, she's so much better than Captain America. You know, so yeah, I mean, I loved what that scene opened up.
I love how everything you just said, there was this delight in the relationship that was being displayed, as if there were a small scale bit of surprise in there that they were depicting the relationship that way. And the fact that we would be at all mildly surprised by the relationship indicates just how accustomed and unconscious we are about how these gender roles are displayed. And for them to kind of unravel those expectations, not in a big way, but just in a coincidental relationship way from moment to moment to moment, was just, like you said, delightful. I thought it was fantastic. Daniel, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I just really wanted to heartily agree with what everyone has said. Actually, this was my favorite scene as well in the bar. I could probably, when it's my turn to talk about my favorite scene.
Sorry, I stole it from you.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I'll just pick a slight. There are multiple moments though that kind of echoed that that feeling that came through most strongly in the bar scene for me. But there were a couple other moments, and so in my case, I was always a fan of the relationship between Peggy and Steve, even in the original film. And the reason was because their connection attraction started when Steve was the original Steve guy, you know, before he became Captain America. It wasn't afterwards that she's like, oh, okay. It was before. And Steve never really changed inwardly. He never let his power get to his head. He was always humble. He never forgot where he came from. So there was that. But yes, this felt even more interesting and nuanced and complex in a good way. And just overall it was hotter. I mean, they always had a hot relationship and romance, in my opinion. It was even hotter now because in that scene in the bar, but also it was peppered throughout in different moments, like when she's working out with a punching bag and he's kind of recovering from his gunshot wound or whatever wound it was, can't remember exactly. And there was another moment when she's about to go rescue Bucky and the squad, and he grabs her hand. He's like, I owe you one. She's like, no, you owe me a dance. You owe me more than that. You owe me a dance. And in these moments, you can just see they're really just genuinely crazy about each other. And what I like so much about it is there's like multiple things going on. On one hand, he's not threatened by her. He doesn't feel like his manhood's at stake or anything like that. He's not bitter that he didn't get to be Captain America either. He's fine. I mean, you know, and again, not feeling threatened by her. And for her part, she's, you know, again, the attraction started before. So the fact that he didn't get juiced up by the super soldier serum and the procedure, she doesn't care. You know, it's not like, oh, well, now you're less of a man, or it's none of that going on. It's just simply a continuation of what had already started. And yeah, it's just, I just loved it so much. I totally agree. It's in that half hour, it was just so much more. Again, I was already a fan of their relationship before, but even so much more in that half hour because it's just so wonderful and fascinating.
Yeah.
What I thought was also interesting was before I saw the episode, I actually it didn't quite spoil it for me, but I had started seeing the commentary on it, especially in Black Twitter. And one of the things, and so what had happened is that there was a couple of posts came up, and you know, it came out of white Twitter that basically said, well, how, you know, basically said that she wasn't attractive because she was big, right? And then it ended up being this really, you know, because she doesn't just get muscular, she gets bigger, right?
Wait a minute, you were saying that being big made her unattractive? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, there are a couple comments about that on Twitter, and then the responses were really interesting. Like there were a whole bunch of responses where they started posting women who were bodybuilders, right? And then women who were just big, and like, oh, so that's not attractive. Oh, so that's not attractive. And so coming into it, I was kind of prepared for there to be something going on around that, because because they were contrasting that. But I also think it's interesting that that this half-hour little show, right, would have those type of reverberations, like coming into and touching on, I wouldn't say it's really part of, but kind of touching on our current like anxiety and debates about appreciating people for who they are, and about how we think in terms of shaming for size, and how we think about gender roles. So there's also some comments about, oh look, she looks so masculine, right? And then people came back and like, so and so looks masculine, but we think she's still beautiful. Blah, blah, blah. It was just really interesting, right?
No, that's what If is designed to do, right?
Yeah.
And it's fantastic when they challenge the canon, not just the canon, but then they challenge the culture that's watching the
Right.
canon, right? It gets these multiple layers of challenge going on.
And I felt like this was like, it was something that only worked because this was animated. You know, I felt like they could do things in animation that they couldn't do with even the best CGI, right? And especially her transformation, you know. And I think that that's also one of the things that I really liked was that in the movie, you know, they use CGI to make, you know, to actually make Steve Rogers look small, and then they also use it to make him look big, right? You can kind of see a little bit of that, right? But there's something about this, the way that it was done in animation, where you didn't even look at it in terms of oh, well, we know that he really doesn't look like that. Oh, this is great CGI, right? Like there's something where it really naturalized these, you know, it really naturalized the physicality, even though it was unnatural physicality.
No, I think that's one of the reasons I've just dug animation my entire life, because you don't get away with anything. You don't get away with any body dynamics from the actors. Nothing gets to be taken for granted. It all has to be done, and the work all has to be there. So you're already in this different what if space. What if bodies look like this? What if bodies moved like this? Putting in an animation and doing it this well. That, I mean, that Daniel said, you know, that scene at the bar when she says, "No, you owe me a dance." I'm sorry, but that's old school hot, you know, exactly like Daniel said. And there was nothing in me about, oh, this is a cartoon, it's weird, I think that's hot. It wasn't part of it at all. It was just transparent, perfect human emotion coming through the imagery. Speaking
imagery, I just, you know, I was slightly worried going into it because I didn't really expose myself to a lot of, you know, pre-episode talk on any forums or Reddit or anything like that. So I just had no idea. I knew what the topic was on the surface, nothing beyond that. I didn't even really know, other than like the poster, what it was going to look like. I mean, it was just so gorgeous. The lighting, the coloring, you know, sometimes when something's like starts from the live action world and then there's a spin-off that's like animation, you sort of worry like, well, is it going to be kind of like, you know, sort of like phoning it in kind of thing? But no, it was absolutely the sound. Oh my God, it was just magnificent. Yeah.
I guess. Go ahead.
You made me think of Daniel. One of my favorite moments was the transition into the scene, right? How like you have the Nazi holding the Tesseract, and then it closes in on the Tesseract, and the Tesseract turns into the ice cube in the glass. And when I was looking at that, I was thinking to myself, that is one of those, that's like a masterclass in how you would do that transition in a live action film. But you're doing it in animation and using animation to fulfill the promise of that type of transition in a way that live action never could. And that blew me away.
No, I have to agree. My favorite line, favorite character, favorite scene was more the capitalizing on MCU world building. I was very much reminded of Rogue One watching this, in the sense when I watched Rogue One, they had done years of work creating this universe. And then suddenly they create this vignette movie kind of like a World War II vignette movie I grew up watching, you know, in the 60s, you know, 10 Force 10 from Navarone or whatever. And you know the whole world. So all this world building has already been done. You know it. So immediately, whenever you're watching any of the scenes, that whole world comes with you. And not only was it just, okay, the whole MCU, but all the cinematic little things, like for example, when Red Skull drives up in the car and then it focuses on the Hydra emblem, that was just cool. That's okay. They've got a movie mindset, and like you're saying, Stanford, the brilliance of the animation is they control everything. Right? If you can try to control lighting, you can try to control camera angles in a movie, but the glass is the glass, the ice cubes are the ice cubes, and you can't control everything. And in the animation, you can. And for me, I mean, I love stripped down animation as well, but for me, this was something new for a 30-minute format, just like Spider-Verse was new for movie format. It was like, oh my God, I could watch this type of stuff my entire life. It was so good. So for me, it was just, what if we capitalized on everything we've done before and gave people a 30-minute little vignette story that they can just kind of enjoy, right? Because they know the world, they know the characters, and that was an absolute joy. And I think it's going to continue.
In an earlier conversation, I think what I was sort of excited by with our discussion is that it seems like, speaking for myself now, I wanted more than a half an hour, right? I mean, you know, it could be digestible, but there was so much more that I was interested in speculation. You know, I wanted to see, they hit the notes that they had to, you know, but I wanted to see more of the relationship building. I wanted to see that sort of him being missing played out a little bit longer. Honestly, where I thought they were going to go, but they didn't, was I thought they were going to make him Winter Soldier. I thought that could be an interesting.
That would have been cool.
What if?
Cool.
You know, and just sort of the general sense of what if, the comics, etc. You kind of got to be into it, right? I mean, you got to be okay with messing with canon, with sort of running these different simulations. And if you buy the collections, for example, the trade paperbacks, one thing that Marvel did with those that I like is that they included the letters to the editor, which the section was called Why Not, which was also very clever, because you can kind of see how the audiences had differential responses to the different stories, right? And, you know, some were really cool with messing with canon and some were not, and it's very diagnostic. So we might see that with the Twitter that you're talking about, Stanford.
And how about the writing? I mean, the amount of human ground they covered in 33 minutes was amazing. And just that emotional arc, it's, you know, you guys, we talked a lot about the emotion. What I love of it is they're watching it, and the whole time we're watching this arc where their relation takes place, we're experiencing it against the backdrop of the movie, right? We're comparing it to what we've seen before, as Stanford was saying. But that creates this interesting arc. We're almost like participants in where this relationship is going to go because of what they've shown us before and what we expect. And I got to say, as a viewer, I felt thoroughly respected. I just felt thoroughly like these people want something good. They've seen all this stuff. They want to immerse themselves in it and want more, as Eric was saying. And I think they accomplished all of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I can't say enough good about this. I was going to say my favorite, favorite scene, right?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say favorite character because I think we all kind of are going to sit on the same character. So,
right.
But there's actually a couple of things that build into my favorite scene. So like, and something that builds in is that moment where she jumps in to become Captain Carter, right? How the general is like telling Howard Stark to jump in, and Howard's like, I'm the button guy, right? It was like
great.
It was like that moment where it's like, oh. And when she does jump in, he's got no qualms about being the guy who pushes that button for her, right?
None at all.
then later when they meet up and he takes the outfit that she was going to use for the USO tour and turns it into her costume and gives her the shield, right? And this moment, what I love about that is it's this moment of support, right? Where on one hand you have this backdrop of misogyny, but you've also got against that background men supporting her, right? And not in an ironic sense, not in a like, well, I'm better than so and so. No, just this is who I am and this is what I do.
Yes.
And that builds up to my favorite scene, which is when she was in the air and she was jumping around and she broke into the plane, broke out of the plane, jumped off the plane, flipped in the air, went through the propeller of the plane,
Absolutely.
knocked the guy out of the plane, and then jumped and does the backflip and lands on Steve Rogers in the giant robot as Hydra Stomper, right?
Right.
But it's also the fact that he's there too. Yet she is center and she lands on him. And I also interpreted that as another moment of support.
Yeah.
He was there to support her. He wasn't there to overshadow her. He wasn't there to show what he could do. He was there to support her and what she could do. And I thought that the way those scenes kind of built up, and especially in that, because when she did that flip, what was interesting was she went from fighting to like this moment in the air where it was complete freedom from concern about whether she was going to be able to land on anything. Because there's a moment where there's no hint at what she could land on. You just say, oh, she's going down. And yet she's smiling.
Yeah.
And then she lands on Hydra Stomper, right?
No.
To me, that was so powerful to see those moments and how those moments built up to that, because there was throughout this arc not only of her excelling, but people trying to support her, and not in a way that it was like, oh, she couldn't have done what she did without them, but in a way that was about giving her space and her time. Yeah.
In my world, I refer to that as diverse expertise, recognizing diverse expertise and finding ways to work together with what we each bring to the table. I also really love the Tony Stark character. And one of the things I loved about it was he was a perfect foil for the Rogers character in terms of his relationship with her. In other words, we saw Steve Rogers have a sort of sexual attraction, if you like, type relationship with Captain Carter. And then we saw Howard Stark, maybe not so much explicitly attracted to her, but he like, what are you guys doing here? When he sees the two of them kissing, like, wait, what's going on? So it's not like they acted as if there were no awareness that they were both a man and a woman. It was there, and it played a certain way that was different than the way it was played with Steve and Captain Carter. At the same time, both of them were respectful ways of being with a woman. And I guarantee they worked hard on that writing, and they did extremely well done.
Yeah, I agree. It was fabulous. I mean, it felt like almost like some sort of Howard Hawks film, in which the Howard Stark character is kind of like one of these characters that you'd see played by Cary Grant, just really suave and funny and witty. And in this case, happy to not get the girl. I mean, again, there was this, it's more like this kind of friendship and respect. And just kind of the ways like standing there in front of the window saying, oh no, just carry on. Like he's genuinely happy to see these two come together. Right. And he just wants to witness it. He's just like, oh, please, just like, I'm not here. Just keep going.
That's so cool. So Daniel, what was your favorite scene for character, favorite line?
Well, I should have come up with a backup favorite scene just in case. I didn't though. So I don't really have, there were so many moments. The moment that Stanford talked about where, and that was another a different bar, I think, where Howard Stark kind of presents the uniform, the shield, and he's saying like, hey, that general's an idiot. Lucky for you, I'm a genius. And you could hear the sort of the shield like shimmering, and just goosebumps, right? Again, goosebumps just thinking about it. That was also a great moment. But there was another one where, so you know how Stanford, you were talking about that action sequence with like her like flipping through the air and everything. A little bit earlier than that, when Steve first shows up in the armor, and then everyone's like, "Steve, is that you?" And he's like, "Hi, Peggy. Now you owe me one." You just see her like beaming. Like there's such a look of genuine. The amount of like emotional nuance they were able to get into this animation is just magnificent. You see like genuine joy on her face. It's not like, "Hey, no, this is my story," you know, like it's just like she's just happy to see him also get his moment to shine, and that he's given this opportunity, like, because she knows he's a hero, and always was, and now he too has this tool or resource that he can also use to help out in the cause, and she's just overjoyed to see him. And you just, there's like this long stretched out moment where we just like, I went back and I didn't rewatch the whole episode, but I watched scenes, and I went back and she's just like, you know, in this kind of like long moment where she's just like looking at him with this huge smile on her face. You see like all these different emotions, like pride, love, obviously she's crazy about him, just like just gratitude to see that. I don't know, it was just amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's also something interesting about the fact that one of the things that we all seem to love about this is that it depicts people who can work together.
Yep.
Like bottom line, it's that's what's happening here, right? We're like, these people can get along. These people can be different and they can get along.
Well, even like when Captain Carter breaks into the enemy prison to liberate Barnes and everyone else, and the character's name's escaping me, but he's the one with the bowler hat, you know, and he has sort of a
Dum Dum Dugan.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, he kind of, you know, has a little bit of sexism come out there, but, you know, but the moment that, you know, she rips the door off and is like, "Let's go." I mean, he was just kind of like, he pivoted rather quickly to be like, "All right, let's rock. This is what we're doing." Yeah. Right. And so.
Yeah, I really like, go ahead.
Oh, just that was my point. Yeah.
I liked the way they had this superwoman and they have these different varieties of supporting men. That, as you said it already, Stanford, is kind of bringing it all together. They take her, they put her in all these different contexts. And what I kind of like about it now that we've talked about it, it says there isn't one way to be a supportive guy. You know, you can go to the Twitterverse and look for what everyone tells you should do, but you are someone and you can just be supportive in terms of who you are. I think that's an incredibly important message, instead of you need to be number one and you need to be, you know, the best, and which is, you know, we often don't say. You need to be supportive in terms of who you are and bring that to the world as a form of support. So thanks for the excellent conversation. What we're going to do now is play a little game we call What If. We've created a what if scenario for this episode, and the three panelists have all entered an answer. So I'm going to read those answers, and the panelists are responsible for writing down who they believe said or wrote each answer. Once they've written down their answers, we'll go through and have them say who they think wrote what, and the one with the largest number of points wins. So the question is, what if this had been written and directed by Quentin Tarantino? All right. So the first answer: there would be a lot more profanity and esoteric pop culture references. That was answer number one. Please record who you think wrote that. And of course, you can change your answers after I've read all three. Number two: Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury would somehow become the main character. It would be a lot more violent, and there would be a highly problematic use of the N-word. Answer three: if Quentin Tarantino wrote Captain Carter, Steve Rogers would have been dismembered by the Nazis and died in Captain Carter's arms before she was pulled into the portal against a backdrop of soldiers using the B and N words. This would ultimately result in several writers filing workplace harassment claims. Question number one: there would be a lot more profanity and esoteric pop culture references. And we will start with Daniel. Who wrote that?
My guess is Eric.
Okay. Stanford, who wrote that?
I wrote down Eric.
Okay. Eric, who wrote that?
Daniel and Stanford together.
Okay. All right. So much for those rules. Okay. We'll go to question number 2. The Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury would somehow become the main character. It would be a lot more violent, and there would be highly problematic use of the N-word. Stanford, who wrote that?
Daniel.
Daniel. Okay. Daniel, who wrote that?
Scott.
Okay. And Eric, who wrote that?
Daniel.
Daniel. Okay. And for the third, if Quentin Tarantino wrote Captain Carter, Steve Rogers would have been dismembered by the Nazis and died in Captain Carter's arms before she was pulled into the portal against the backdrop of soldiers using the B and N words. This would ultimately result in several writers filing workplace harassment claims. Eric, who wrote that?
Stanford.
Denver. Daniel, who wrote that?
Definitely Stanford.
All right. Stanford, who wrote that?
You did, Scott.
Yeah, I did. Okay. Well, it looks like you all are tied, so there's no winner because you all got it right.
But
So,
actually, I did write down that Stanford wrote the last one.
there you go. All
And I
right.
can legit say that I didn't make it up at the last minute. I did it like when at the very beginning. So
No, I got you. So next time I'll make sure that I actually submit an answer to the game and therefore increasing the degrees of freedom for potential failure. But tonight you were all highly successful. You know each other. So there it is. Hold on.
Can I say that it's actually funny that we all made sure to put profanity in our answers?
Totally. Totally.
well, here's the thing. If you had said directed, I was at first I wrote it as if he directed, and I was like, oh, Haley Atwell, she's gonna have to file a workplace endangerment claim because that's what happened, the whole thing with Kill Bill. And I was like, oh wait, he wrote it. So
Yeah. There you go.
changed everything.
Well, that about wraps it up for tonight's episodes. Thanks so much for tuning in. What If crew members, please tell the audience where they can find you on social media, and we shall start with Stanford.
You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and on Clubhouse at SW Carpenter.
Fantastic. How about you, Daniel?
Not super active these days on social media, but Facebook and Twitter both. You can find me or us really at Pop Mythology. So on Twitter, that's just Pop Mythology, one word, lowercase, and Facebook, you just look up Pop Mythology. Basically post stuff from our blog, articles from the blog on those social media channels.
Fantastic. How about you, Eric?
So you can find more information than you probably ever wanted to know about me if you go to the Department of Psychology's webpage, to my profile there. You can find me on Twitter at Eric Wesselmann, and I have a film blog. If you Google film culture, normal theater.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter at dark_loops, and you can find all episodes of the What If crew at the Dark Loops Productions channel on YouTube. If you'd like to leave feedback about this podcast, please do so here on this YouTube page or send an email to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. Okay. So there it is. From all of us to all of you, big hugs, and remember, we
are the Watchers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.